Well, it's been more than 100 days since the African Continental Free Trade Agreement came into effect. The agreement, which ultimately sees African trade operating more or less like the EU, could transform economies on the continent. But where do we go from here? Yavi Madurai, the Executive Director of the Pan-African Businesswomen Association, joins us now. Yavi, thank you so much to have you in studio with me, obviously COVID compliant. This is fantastic news because this is a 100-day mark. We are celebrating Africa Month in the month of May. Talk to me about where the process is now 100 days on.
So there's so many moving parts to it, as you can imagine. 54 states is just one that is holding out on us, Eritrea, but there's all these different moving parts to it. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and you referred to the EU, the second thing is that the one aspect that I think from an Africa Month perspective that we need to pat all African leaders on their backs for is 54 states have signed, 36 ratified, instruments have been submitted. Yet in the EU, just comparatively, just for people who don't know, is that 57 years after the EU started their trade area or their trade agreement, it took 57 years for the last country to do the same that we've done in a few years. So there's a very different dynamic when it comes to that. Having said that, there are these moving parts that we need to worry about. And when we look at it, there are things to be concerned about, but there are things to also look at and go, we are moving in the right direction. There's a couple of things to be very, very positive about when it comes to the AfCFTA and the fact that it will operationalize by the 1st of July, and where we are in that process, you know, phase 1, phase 2 of the protocols are already in play. There are already signs, huge signs, you know, tangible signs that these things will start to play out and still will start to be implemented and roll out. So yeah, we're on a good wicket, so to speak.
I would imagine with the dynamics that you mentioned and also how long it takes for these countries to come to one table, it had to be done in the manner that it's done. You mentioned phases. Now, we know that phase 1 was negotiations on protocols and translating policy into action, and that, as you've said, will then kick off on the 1st of June. What are South Africans likely to see? I mean, what does this mean for, you know, businesses that are already really trading into the African space? What are we likely to see? What are the positive things that will come out of this phase 1?
So just so that everyone is kind of up to speed, there's only 3 countries that are actually ready to go, so to speak, in terms of, you know, businesses that have been assessed and understood in terms of that free trade area, products that have been, you know, checked and understood. We've got thousands of products, for example, from a South African perspective. So the 3 countries are Ghana, which is where the AfCFTA is being hosted, Egypt and South Africa, which are ready from a customs operationalization perspective. But having said that, the Council of Ministers, which is an authority within the AU, has approved like an escrow account for those countries that are not necessarily completely ready but need to start, and that reimbursement will happen as time goes by. That is an indication, just as a side, that is an indication of the nimbleness and the things we don't see in Africa. There's always lots of red tape, and that just shows how quickly things are moving. When there is a roadblock, when there is a challenge, it allows us to be able to, or allows the AfCFTA to be able to nimbly meet some of the goals. So let's go back to South Africa. When you look at it from a South African perspective, some of the things that, and I'm going to talk more rather the opportunities, so that people can start to look at how can we get involved, how can we start to take advantage of it, is that there are thousands of products that have been listed by South Africa that are ready for free trade. So to be able to implement, and the moment they say, which is hopefully 1st of July, we'll be able to go. You know, it's kind of an open market, so to speak. So that's the first thing, is that is ready. The second thing about it is that we are the most industrialized nation on the continent. Having said that, there are other countries that are catching up in terms of very specific areas, but we're still the most industrialized nation. So what it means for us is that it means economic development entrepreneurship from a very high level perspective can start to be implemented, and look at how we can use it to inject income, cash into, you know, the likes of you and me, so to speak, people on the ground, not just sit at government level. The thing that we need to do better at is that lots of these things, when they happen, and it's normal, not acceptable, but normal, is that it sits within government's spaces. We need to become more focused and refined around communication and awareness to the ladies that are selling, you know, dresses on Instagram, to the people that are selling things that are available for free trade, but they don't even know that they are. They don't know what they don't know. So we need to become far more refined and focused in our communication efforts around what can we do, what are we ready for, did you know that you are ready, did you know that you are able to get investment into your business to be able to allow you to do cross-border trade. So these are the kind of things that we need to be able to do to close the gap. But we are one of 3 countries that are the first in terms of that readiness to be able to go from a very large or overarching perspective.
I mean, it's fantastic news, right? Especially for those businesses that are already well established. But what about the onerous systems that are already in play in South Africa? I mean, are we ready? Do we have the infrastructure as the most industrialized country, as you say, to do this and to support entrepreneurs that are probably more ready to trade, you know, cross-border than in this very country?
Yes and no. So, you know, like anything, unfortunately, there is a gap. And there's that inequality gap that exists between the very well-established organizations that have been well-funded and are running for years, and they know all the tricks of the trade, so to speak. So we need to, and that's the gap, part of the gap that I'm referring to, is that we need to start getting them up to speed. I'll give you an example of Nigeria. Nigeria is not one of the 3 countries. However, they have already done assessments on all of their businesses. They've identified which companies are, you know, at the different levels, completely ready to go, and so on. They have then created investment infrastructure from a government perspective into the businesses that are from maybe the 2nd or 3rd level down, and prioritizing them according to that, to be able to get, let's say, number 20 or number 30, you know, over the next 3 to 5 years, up to a number 2 or a number 3. So this is what we would need. We would need, and that is, you know, we have a group of people that are from a Pan-African perspective that I have access to in a network. And when I speak to the advisor to the Minister of Trade, who's a close compatriot of mine, these are the kind of things that they are doing on a daily basis. They have an AFCFTA strategy that's being developed as we speak that will be available to the public. When I asked him this morning, actually, I was like, if I had to say to you, what is the one thing that you believe needs to be done to close gaps? It was a very broad question that I said to him, and he thought for a couple of seconds, and he said to me, communication. Yeah. The people at the bottom of the line need to be equally communicated to than the people, or actually maybe more than the people that are ready to go. So there's all of these wonderful things in place. And as I've just said to you, we are one of the top 3 countries that are ready to go. So we need to get that information. What does ready to go mean? Yeah. Is it your product? Is it your business? Do you need compliance from a quality perspective maybe? What is it that I need to get my product or service, which is a low-hanging fruit for South Africa, to be able to be ready to do cross-border trade? So for me, it's a combination of that, understanding where your business lies in terms of the gaps that you have. Maybe you are 80% ready, maybe you are 90% ready, but if you don't know, how do you know? So we need to be able to get those businesses that are not, that's my passion. So when you said it, I smiled, because from a Pabua perspective, these are the kind of things that we want to be able to focus on in getting those businesses ready. Rules of origin is if you fill up 10 libraries, anyone involved in trade will tell you rules of origin, you can fill up 1 million libraries, you still won't be done. So these are the kind of things that we need to be able to make aware. I want to say this to you. Intra-Africa trade sits at 16.6% today. Well, 2019 was the last time they do the stats, so that's a stat we use. Intra-EU trade, this is even before Brexit, is 67%. Intra-Asia trade is 60%. So we have a massive gap to close. So that's both an opportunity and a challenge because we've got gaps within that gap. But it's an opportunity because if we start to close those gaps and work from a very refined perspective and have a strategy and communicate to that level that is, below the 100% readiness, we will be able to close that gap very, very quickly.
So intra-Africa trade at 16%, you said?
Yeah, 16.6.
Isn't this the most opportune time then to take this opportunity as African countries? Because, I mean, if you look at COVID-19 and how it's affected various businesses, a lot of the businesses have pivoted. A lot of the businesses are treating this as business unusual, and they're willing, to do a number of different things. Shouldn't we then be capitalizing on this pandemic, actually, to speak? I mean, I'm thinking of just the travel ban that's been imposed by the US as an example, and how we are not looking within the continent to close those gaps, as a tourism sector. Shouldn't this be the opportunity where we close that gap?
100%. If you think about it, there was a time, I mean, now we've got travel bans, but there was a time where we couldn't leave the continent, we couldn't leave the country. Yeah. Continent and country was all we had. And technically we survived that because of the fact that we have resources and we have countries that are ready to be able to also teach the other countries, because remember, we've got different levels of readiness. So remember that the AFCFTA, let's go back to basics for 2 seconds. AFCFTA is the crown jewel of Agenda 2063. Where does Agenda 2063 and the African Union come from is Kwame Nkrumah's speech, almost 60 years ago around African unity. So this is, AFCFTA is merely an economic unifier. But within an economic unifier, we need to shift other things. We need to shift intra-Africa unifiers, not just based on the AFCFTA, but we've got to appreciate African-made products. So there will be a protocol on a made in Africa, for example, from a phase 2 perspective. So when we look at it, Unathi, there are millions of opportunities, but we've got to get our intra-Africa. And what do I mean by that? Quite simply, we've got to start appreciating each other's products and services. We must stop thinking, and I'm going to say it very, very openly, because I'm tired I've stopped sugarcoating it, is that we must stop aspiring to our colonizers' products, because that's basically in our DNA. The French and the British products are superior to ours. Wine from South Africa is a made in Africa product that can be equated to a global product. There's all these teas, there's all these coffees, there's all these different products that you can take and are equivalent. But we've got to get our mindset right from an intra-Africa perspective around appreciating, first of all, made in Africa, and then buying from each other.
Yavi, I could talk to you the whole day, especially all the other topics that we have not covered. But these are positive news. This is a positive step. So we will be definitely keeping an eye on July 2021 to see how that phase 1 goes. Thank you so much for your time.